And good day. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. I decided to go on my own today rather than have a guest because there's a lot to say about Trump's speech, about the state of our nation, about the responsibility that comes with all of our freedoms. So I'm going to throw something out that might surprise some people, and you might go, oh, wait a minute. The responsibility of the free world depends on you. And you go, wait, what? I'm just one guy, just one gal. Sorry, there's only two choices in this particular question. You're either a guy or a gal. How could the responsibility of the free world depend on me? Well, it's pretty simple. What if we were to break that down a little bit and say, the freedom in the world depends on the United States, depends on America. You go, well, yeah, kind of does, because let's face it, India is a very flawed democracy, not that we're not a flawed republic. Russia doesn't believe in freedom whatsoever. Iran, who's one of the big powerhouses in the Middle East, doesn't believe in freedom whatsoever. China doesn't believe in freedom whatsoever. So, okay, so people will buy in at that level. Let's take this one step farther. Keep moving down the ladder. Your support of the Constitution is what underpins the freedoms here in our country. And what's the first part of the Constitution? We the people. So your understanding of the Constitution, of how it limits government, how it gives all rights to the people and is talking about limiting the government, and it enumerates those rights that are given. They're inalienable rights, meaning rights that can't be taken away because they're given by a higher power rather than given by government. Now, as you look around the world and you look at democracies, that makes us truly unique and special. Most places around the world, your rights are given by government, which means they can take them away. And I think that's what the Democrats would want, is they want a government that can take your rights away when they choose for the good of the. If you said something and somebody had to go to their cry room, that would be sad. What if you said something that they just didn't like? And, that would be, and say it was just, there was a matter of difference of opinion and they didn't believe that you had the right to say it. Oh, kind of like during the Biden administration, where they decided that they knew about COVID better than you. Now, maybe they know better than some people, but they absolutely suppressed information. For instance, the government said, and Lord Fauci said, masks work. Oh, masks don't work. Oh, masks work, and you must wear them. Oh, if you get COVID, natural immunity, well, we don't really think it works. So you have to get in line. And we're going to mandate that you get in line because they fired a whole bunch of federal workers and they fired quite a lot of the military. You had to go get this shot that was experimental. And if you got the shot, then the effects would be less and you could no longer spread it. Turned out completely wrong. And they ignored the possibility of side effects, as all the while telling us that natural immunity didn't work. So here's a pretty basic situation where government decided it knew better. It decided that, your freedom of assembly, why, it's gone. You have to stay 6 feet apart. Oh, unless you're part of the Buy Large Mansions BLM movement. And then, well, for the good of the country, we can ignore all of this tyranny that the government is imposing on you and go ahead and protest. And if you happen to riot or loot or burn things along the way because you're mad or just because you want to get some free stuff, it's okay. And there were several hundred doctors that signed off on that and said, yeah, racism's more important than worrying about the flu. Oh, I mean COVID-19. Think there's a problem there? So we didn't demand our rights. Here in Commie, California, led by Lord Newsom, Gavin Newsom, we were told not only could you not attend church, but you can't sing in church. Well, what about freedom of religion right there in the First Amendment, right there with your right to protest? Well, protests are okay in one case because it favors our narrative, but it's not okay in the other. Peaceful protests are fine. Violent protests are not okay. We get to that other aspect because there's 5 aspects to the First Amendment. They told us, oh no, you can't go to church, you can't sing in church, like they could tell us what to do in church. And a whole bunch of people, including leaders, meaning pastors, priests, whatever designation you would call that would lead a church. No, you no longer have that right. What about freedom of speech? The Biden administration, because speech is, First Amendment isn't just freedom of speech. It's one of the things. They censored us. How could this possibly be okay? Now, how does all this tie together to you're responsible for the freedom in the free world? Well, we didn't demand our rights. A whole bunch of people, it's like, oh, well, just tell me what to do. And, it's only for a little while. And my freedom is more, well, no, it's less important than my safety. So we have to do this for safety. Our founding fathers said, give me liberty or give me death, because they were hardcore. I'm hardcore. I wore a mask in a few places where I had to until I found a better grocery store. And I wore a mask on purpose with a sheep mask. In other words, looked just like a sheep. Put that, and then I put a mask over the sheep, and then I went to protests. It was miserable wearing that thing. But it made the point to people that, the sheep are wearing masks. We shouldn't be sheep. Our founding fathers were lions, not sheep. They were against tyranny. And if we learn our rights, they enshrine this document that I believe is the most important non-religious document ever written, that allows you to have a choice, and it allows you to define your own destiny, that limits the government. Matter of fact, they even put in an amendment, actually kind of 2 amendments, one about enumerated rights and one about, in other words, spelled out rights, and one about rights that are not addressed, the 9th and 10th Amendments. Those 2 amendments are about limiting government. The 10th Amendment specifically says if it's not written down, that right falls to, and we haven't thought of it yet, that right falls to the state or to the people. I prefer the people because, I live in a state run by, at best, authoritarians, at worst, far leftist communists that want me to have no choice. So if we're responsible for the freedom of the free world, and Trump is currently the leader of the free world, and I think that's fair to say. I know my leftist friends will melt down at the thought of Trump is the leader of the free world, but he was overwhelmingly elected. All the swing states he won. He got significantly more votes than Kamala Harris. He won the popular vote. He said he was going to do things like get together with RFK and through MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. They were going to get together and they were going to try to fix our health system and our food. He got together with somebody like Tulsi Gabbard, who's been speaking out against government overreach, even though she was a Democrat. Up till recently, she was a Democrat. Because she was a populist on the left at one point. She supported 3-mansion Bernie Sanders. She wants to limit government. She wants transparency in government, and Trump campaigned on that. And then Trump said he was going to close the border. And Biden said, well, that's impossible. We can't do it without legislation. And yet somehow Trump got 90% less traffic, illegal traffic across the border. 90%, more than 90, with just a few executive orders. So clearly, just like Trump said in his speech, the right president would make all the difference. So if Trump's a populist, meaning for the people, and that some of the left is populist, but he's embraced this huge idea that, wait, government should be responsive to the people, that bureaucrats should not be making the decisions, but the electeds should be responsible. Now, you might not always like Trump's decisions, but I love that idea that the electeds are responsible, not some three-letter government agency. Now, I would contend that maybe we could rename that, instead of government agencies being three-letter, I think maybe we should give them a fourth letter so that we can refer to them as the government departments as four-letter words. Don't know if that'll work, but this populism is changing the world. We've seen significant shift in Canada. Justin Trudeau, he's a pretty boy. He's a smooth talker. He's much like Gavin Newsom, meaning he will lie to you about anything and specializes in hypocrisy. Loves to lecture people how he's better than, and how, we all have to be loving and compassionate. Well, it'd be nice if that was the world, but let's face it, the world is not always a nice place. But we should be trying to defend things like honor, decency. And I would define decency a little differently than, say, Trudeau would. Because Trudeau would be, well, you're not decent if you don't agree with me. And I would say, do unto one as you would have one do it to you. In other words, treat other people as you want to be treated. It's not more complicated than that. We don't need government to give us rules on how to do that. Well, Trudeau's on his way out. Thank goodness. And in Canada, Pierre Poilievre. He's the most likely next Prime Minister of Canada, though they have a mind-boggling system of governance that I don't completely grasp. It's unlike our representative republic. It's not about limiting government. It empowers government to take over your life. Nonetheless, because of Trump, because of this populist movement, Canada has shifted towards common sense and towards being for the people. But that's not the only place. If we look at what's happened in Argentina with Javier Milei, the crazy guy with the chainsaw cutting government agencies. Argentina has gone from more than 20% inflation to almost zero. And he's only been in months, not even a year yet. And the Argentinian economy is flourishing. So again, Trump is affecting the world. Europe has had enough. They're getting tired of having Davos and the European Union. In other words, the overarching government. Think of all of those countries in Europe. They kind of agreed to be in this conglomeration, just like our states and our federal government. Well, the EU and each country, they're kind of in the same relationship. But a bunch of those countries have had enough because they're being told, well, you have to be at net zero on carbon. You have to have these opinions. In other words, the global elites are telling them who they should be, how they should live their lives, and, oh, yes, you need to take as many illegals as we tell you and not do anything to stop it. So they're not allowed to protect each unique culture. For instance, each state has a unique culture here in the United States. In Europe, it's even more so because they speak different languages. They have different values. Well, you've seen a rise of populism all over, whether it's Italy or Spain or Hungary with Viktor Orban or Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, or the rise of the Dutch Farmers' Party that said, we're the most productive farmland in the world per acre, and you want to cut us down to net zero and make us stop doing the most effective, most productive farmland per acre in the world, better than the U.S. Now, a large part of that is because so much of their farmland is indoors. In other words, it's in greenhouses. So it's tremendously expensive to do what they do, but they're incredibly good at it and highly productive. And the EU's idea is, well, we don't really need to feed people. Oh, maybe they didn't think that through. There's a hunger crisis in the world. We don't need to feed people. Let's just cut back to net zero because carbon zero is what must be done because governments decided. As if the final say isn't the people, like it is here in the United States. The final say is with government. Oh, let's bow before government. So how does this get to Trump's speech? Well, one of the things I loved is Trump started his speech and he talked about how no matter what he did, he threw it right in their faces. No matter what he did, if he cured cancer, these people, the Democrats, would not clap for him. And, I think the Democrats are just on the wrong side of common sense in this case, because they wouldn't clap for anything except once. They did clap for something Trump did once. He talked about the money he gave to Ukraine. So the money that was going to a foreign country, to a dictator. In other words, Ukraine, I understand there are reasons to support Ukraine, but let's face it. You got the big dictator in Putin, who's not a good guy, and you got the little dictator that's full of himself, named Zelensky, that's canceled elections, doesn't allow free speech, controls the press, doesn't allow freedom of religion. And the money that we're sending, we can't audit it. We don't know what happened to it. We also know that a lot of the weapons we sent to Ukraine, they got sold on the black market at 20% on the dollar. There's real problems there. So one of the most contentious issues that's murky and not completely clear, fairly clear to me, but I think to a lot of people not particularly clear, that's what the Democrats clapped for. So I thought that was kind of brilliant. He also pointed out that immigration, illegal immigration, not legal immigration, where people actually come here and they check in with our government and then they don't just do whatever they want. In other words, we screen for criminals, crazy things like that. That border crossing, it dramatically shifted because Trump enacted different policies. Biden said it wasn't possible, or at least Biden, the mouthpiece. That meant that now we know all it took was a little bit of effort from the leader of the free world, used to be Biden, now it's Trump, to almost stop the illegal crossings. You're never going to get 100%, but to almost stop them just through some executive orders. Well, if that's the case, folks, you need to know the Democrats wanted this illegal flow of immigration. Now, I'm not quite sure why they made these choices, but they definitely wanted it. Now, as we look at Trump's speech, and he's going along and he's bringing up a lot of good things, and then he's honoring some people, which politicians always do. Like he honored a kid that almost died of cancer, is now 13, wants to be a police officer, and his dying wish, he thought he was going to die. Young African-American man, I guess we can call him man, somewhere between man and boy at 13. Wanted to be a police officer, so he went around and his dying wish, he went to all these police departments, and all this happened during the time that, we were supposed to defund the police. And this kid was kind of a beacon of hope. Well, Trump brought this kid up and honored him, making him an honorary member of the Secret Service. Now, is that politics? Look, every major politician plays this kind of game, but the fact that the Democrats were against this illustrates their insanity. We're going to go ahead and take our first break.
We're living in a country that's the finest place on earth. But some folks don't appreciate this land that gave them birth. I hear that up in Washington they're having an awful fuss, 'cause communists and spies were making monkeys out of us. The bureaus and departments have been busy night and day. They're figuring out just how we gave our secrets all away. And Congress has appointed a committee, so they said, to find out who's American and who's a low-down red. They call them up to Washington to speak for Uncle Sam. But when they ask them what are, they shut up like a clam. I wish they'd take and put me on the witness stand today. I'd yell so loud old Stalin could hear me all the way. I'm no communist, I'll tell you that right now. I believe a man should own his own house and car and cow. I like this private ownership, I want to be left alone. Let the government run its business and let me run my own. Our government is bigger than it ever was today. The more they hire to work for it, the more they have to pay. Our public servants should be proud and honest.
Rollins, the Constitutionalist. You're on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Which, for my online listeners, for my podcast listeners, that was Scotty and Lulu Bell. Sorry we didn't share it with the radio, but, you know, in 1952, there was this song that a whole bunch of artists recorded. It was called I'm No Communist. What happened to that sentiment? It talks about how even back then, communists were infiltrating. You know, right in that time, I believe that was Nikita Khrushchev, former Soviet Union, and he said, we're going to take you over. Well, I believe that the Democrats have embraced that idea of communism. For instance, Bernie Sanders, you know, the avowed socialist who votes with the Democrats, he had his honeymoon in the USSR. Beautiful country. But he went there for politics, not because it's a beautiful country. So this is not a new problem that we're facing. Now, getting back to Trump's speech, they wouldn't clap for that young African-American man, the 13-year-old, that wants to be a cop, that got honored, becoming an honorary Secret Service member. They wouldn't clap for the naming of a park through executive order. And the reason Trump named this park is because this poor woman, she lost her child because her child was murdered by illegal immigrants, criminals. You know, those same criminals that here in California, our state law, I think that's SB 1554. Don't hold me to the number on that. We're not allowed in California. Law enforcement is not allowed to turn over criminals, you know, people that have committed crimes that are in jail, to ICE, to the federal government. So I thought it was a good thing that he honored this poor woman, that she lost her kid. The Democrats wouldn't clap. Next thing you know, you've got a senior citizen with a cane named Al Green. He happens to also be a congressman. And he's playing the whole get off my lawn part. Can you see the old man yelling at the kids, get off my lawn? Well, that's Al Green, shaking his cane, interrupting the president's speech, talking about you're not going to cut Medicaid. Except, when did Trump talk about Medicaid during the speech? Because I listened all 40 minutes and I missed it. So he kept interrupting Trump and he finally had to be removed. I want to say thank you to the Democratic Party. I want to say thank you to Al Green. You did a better job of illustrating how you're against common sense. You're against anything remotely America first. Now, it wasn't just Al Green. He was removed. The speaker had to have him removed because there has to be some sort of decorum. But also, I want to again say thank you to the Democratic Party. They found these little paddles like you have in bingo, and then they wrote stuff on each side like false. Elon Musk. I'm a communist. Well, maybe they didn't have it on there because I think it's too long of a word. And they'd hold those up. So they looked like fools. It was so much fun. Thank you to the Democrats for proving to me that you're not honest. You're so Trump deranged that if Trump saved a kitten, you'd be like, that kitten's evil. How come that kitten wasn't taken care of with an abortion before it was delivered? That's how crazy they are. They're on the wrong side of common sense. Well, if we have a government that is on the wrong side of common sense, and again, we have freedom and we have liberty here, so I believe you have the right to be profoundly wrong. I'm not trying to censor you. I'm trying, in this case, to encourage the Democrats. Great move. Great move. Truly impressive. If you were to look at focus groups, from like CBS, something like 73% of people from the CBS panel approved of Trump's speech. If you look at issues, which are kind of crazy, like waste in government, because Doge is about waste in government, about making it transparent, about not wasting money on ridiculous stuff. 77% of people like how Trump is handling that issue of waste in government. And I believe this is a CBS poll. What about immigration? 77% of the people like what Trump is doing on immigration. What about Ukraine and Russia? 73% of people like what Trump is doing with Ukraine and Russia. What about tariffs? That one's a little more contentious. Tariffs are definitely America first. Well, 65% of the people, still, all of those profound mandates in political terms. We're a pretty 50-50 country in a lot of ways. But Trump is profoundly successful in those areas. And it's not just here, a conservative that's ripping the Democrats. David Axelrod, he gave him grief because they wouldn't cheer for a kid. He considered the whole old man get off my lawn, Al Green yelling at Trump and not trying to have a conversation, but just yelling at Trump, or the paddles. Even a Democrat strategist, a guy who worked for Bill Clinton, he talked about how they were ridiculous. It's almost worth tuning into MSNBC. I'm saying that wrong. MSNDNC. Because they're the Democratic network, except for Scott Jennings. Or was he on CNN? He's on CNN. But even Reince Priebus, who was on MSNBC, talking about the speech. Now, this is a former chair of the Republicans, very moderate one. And he talked about how the Democrats were ridiculous. Look, the man seems to try to find reasons to agree with the Democrats on a regular basis. Look at what Joe Rogan said. All of these common sense Democrats, they're separated from their party. Because what their party wants is, there's multi-genders. It was interesting how the Democrats, in a stunt, a lot of them wore pink to support women's rights. But when Trump talked about eliminating men, because there's only two genders, sorry to break it to you. When he talked about eliminating men from women's sports, they didn't clap. They weren't okay with it. Really? So are they really for women if they're okay with the whole story of the high school girl that got hit in the face when her team went to play, and there was a pretend woman that smacked her in the face with a volleyball, and she ended up with brain damage? She was at the speech, and the Democrats wouldn't cheer for her. Again, part of me's mad, and part of me's thank you. Keep showing who you really are, because it shows that where your loyalties are. Let's see. We need to defend government. We need to have all these hidden programs. They talked about, Elise Slotnick, she's a congresswoman. She had the response to the president. She talked about how, we wanted to get rid of the waste and corruption. Really? They had 4 years. Did they do any of it? Or are those just more politician empty words? Bill Clinton fired something, I don't remember the number, somewhere around 1 million people during his essentially reforming of government. Now, he ended up rehiring most of those people. Just change it. But he came in and made massive changes. Trump's fired less than 40,000 people so far. People that weren't doing anything. When Trump does it, it's bad. When Bill Clinton did it, it was the new age. Or the idea that we can have something like Doge. Well, Bill Clinton had the equivalent of that. Barack Obama had the equivalent of that. Barack Obama even had legislation written in. And that's why it's much easier for Trump to navigate this. To have a department like Doge. He just called it something different. The Democrats don't want transparency. They don't want you to know that your money's going to foreign countries to promote, let's see, a Sesame Street, an LGBTQ Sesame Street that will be played in Iran, which, frankly, I think if you got caught watching it, they might execute you. What a waste of money. How about we just support the Iranian people and try to get rid of their corrupt dictator? Oh, Barack Obama could have done that. He didn't. Joe Biden could have done that. He didn't. Trump went, okay, you want to act like a terrorist and support all of these terror groups around the region? And Iran is the hub of that. Then I'm going to impose sanctions like you've never seen. Barack Obama went with, let me fly you a giant helicopter full of money, to buy you off so that you'll be nice to your people. Which foreign policy worked? Clearly, the idea that we paid Iran, and that was part of the nuclear deal. And yet, they're still trying to develop that nuclear weapon. I hope they're not there. Frankly, I don't have a high enough security clearance to know the truth of it. But let's see. A state that eagerly and actively promotes terrorism around the entire region, run by a religious monarch. That's essentially what the Shah is. Yeah, they could be trusted with nuclear power. Maybe that was a bad idea. So, if one party won't cheer, we essentially have one party of common sense and one party that, I guess at some point the Democrats were a good party. I don't see a lot of evidence of that, but some of them were right because some of them voted for the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Interestingly, almost every Republican voted for it, and only about half the Democrats voted for it. So they were half right there, because we should have equality. Martin Luther King's dream was a brilliant idea. I think it was something essentially American that actually goes hand in hand with the Constitution. The left will say that we were a country founded essentially on slavery, that they'll point to the 3/5 of a man that the South got credit for. Well, if you read Frederick Douglass, first African-American senator, happened to be a Republican, and this is back in the days right around Lincoln. Well, he's before then, a little before Lincoln. He talked about, and when he studied the issue at a much closer distance than us, he went, well, wait a minute. The North punished the South because the South would not acknowledge African Americans as full citizens, as Americans. So that by them being 3/5, that gave the North more power. So the South actually got punished because they were doing the wrong thing. There weren't the votes to fix the problem at that time. But what was the party of Lincoln? Why, that was a Republican. A Republican then was willing to go to war over this issue. It took some time. Politics are always downstream of culture. And as the abolitionists kept pushing for the idea, and they were largely Christian abolitionists, they kept pushing for the idea that, well, wait a minute, God says we're all created equal, that we're all flawed, that we all have this journey where we're going to sin, if you read the Bible, but that there's also hope and that maybe we can rise up and do better. So the abolitionists kept pushing and shifting the culture, particularly in the North, away from the idea that slavery was even okay. And then some of the abolitionists were, frankly, still a little racist because the times were different. But I don't know that it was because of skin color as much as people looked down on anybody that was not part of your immediate little group. So, do we have a mixed history? Yep. Every country has blood on their hands. Never forget that. So where does our responsibility come in all this? If your responsibility is to support the Constitution, which supports freedom in the world, what can you do? Pretty simple. Pretty simple. What if you began to learn your rights? What if you began to speak about your values? So, if you began to learn your rights through the Constitution, how would you do that? Well, Pocket Constitution is not a very long document. You could just read it. But wouldn't you be a lot more effective if you could actually discuss it or you saw a course on it? Well, there's all kinds of opportunities there. You can go to Constitutional Live and look at Rick Green if you want to see a very Christian conservative perspective on the Constitution. He's part of Wall Builders. You could also go and watch the PBS version, which is more left, and I don't agree with everything, but I'd rather have you learn about the Constitution even a little bit wrong than not learn about it. You could go to the JBS series called Constitution is a Solution, which doesn't as much talk about the First Amendment, the Second Amendment. It says this here. It talks about general principles of the Constitution, so that even if you don't want to memorize what the Fifth Amendment is, you still understand the underlying principles that protect our freedoms, that in effect, that allow the freedoms to happen in this country. Another great place to go. Hillsdale College has great videos, a video series called Constitution 101. All of these things I mentioned, they're online. They're free. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have to reinvent ourselves. We have to become the change that we want to see. And you say, oh, I'm too busy. Everybody's busy. We have more blessings and more opportunity, and you can define your own destiny here. So yeah, you can choose to be lazy, sit on your butt, just watch the game, and never go meet your government, never hold government accountable, and let somebody else make the decision, but somebody will make that decision. I'm the type of guy that I'd rather be part of the decision. We're going to go ahead and take our last break. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXCX, the best talk in town. Thank you to everybody that listens on social media. I hope I remember in just a minute to thank the people that are listening on radio, because I always thank the people on social media, but it doesn't seem fair. Please like, please subscribe. Please give thoughtful comments. Let's go ahead and come back. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXCX, the best talk in town. So we've had a kind of a discussion. We've talked about Trump's speech a bit. We've talked about the state of the country. And let's face it, there's a lot of problems in our country. There always will be. But if we continue on the path that we're going, meaning we don't cut waste, we don't make government more transparent, we don't limit foreign aid and be smart about it, if we don't take care of America first, but instead we follow a globalist agenda, meaning we're not the unique special country, we're just another country. We're kind of like Michelle Obama's take on the United States. Once her husband was elected, she said this more than once, but said it in an important speech, "This is the first time I've ever been proud of my country." That's sad. It took her husband being elected, and I'm not begrudging a black man being elected. I'm saying if that was the first time she was ever proud of her country. You know, I can be proud of my country and yet often not proud of my politicians. Do people not realize that? The left has spent so much time trying to destroy and tear down the things that make this country the beacon for the free world. I want to say that again. The left has spent a huge amount of time trying to tear down the things that make this country special and unique. Oh, this isn't a good country. Our culture here in the United States that values work and freedom and independence, it's not what makes us better. Every country's just as good. And they don't seem to want immigrants to come in and assimilate. What they want is people divided so it's easier to control them. Why? If we were to look at what the communists did, and you read about Karl Marx, why they wanted to divide us, not have things in common, so that we were easier to control. Almost as if we go back to that idea that Nikita Khrushchev did, that we will take over your education system. What percentage of college professors are on the left? 90% in most places. Hillsdale College being one of the beacons that's better than that. So they have taken over higher education. And in many cases, they've done their best to indoctrinate, to try to convince kids of something that's simply not true, meaning there's more than one gender. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't multiple ways to choose to sleep with whatever of the two genders, whatever combo you want to do. I don't want to know. But that does mean that there's still only two genders, and many school districts, particularly here in California, they've embraced that. Now, there's good news. Trump has said, oh no, we're going to cut your funding if you're trying to convince kids of something that is profoundly not true. And I don't even see any argument about this. Don't get me wrong. That's not that the left won't argue. It's that they don't have facts to back them up. Here's another way that Trump has pledged to try to make a huge difference in having free and fair elections. What he wants is a federal law that in federal elections there must be voter ID. Matter of fact, he took it another step because California, who's broke, even though Gavin Newsom talks about how much money we have. And the legislature, along with Lord Newsom, just decided that they needed $50 million to fight Trump's policies. Then they went and said, well, we need $40 billion with a B to pay for the LA fires, and we need the federal government's help. Well, Trump said, okay, I want some strings on this money. I want it to be transparent so we can track what you did with it because we don't trust you. Seems fair. And I want voter ID. Now, I don't know what will actually happen with that, but I'm truly hopeful that if we have voter ID, paper ballots, because machines can be hacked, that the will of the people, and it won't always go my way, will be heard. So that would be foundational to making sure that our representative republic, we don't have a direct democracy. Direct democracy means that majority rules always. So the majority decides something and the minority gets stomped on. We have instead a system that protects everyone's rights. So the majority gets most of what they want, but they never get 100%. Because with this divided government and this separation of powers, no one portion of the government has full control. That was brilliant. That applies to today. Those that are saying, hey, the Constitution's just this old document, doesn't matter. Those men were all old white racists. Okay, I hear you. But if I look at the principles that they set forth, then I will go, well, wait a minute. The idea that, let's see, our freedom begins with the individual. That is so foundational to being American. It allows for freedom and independence. So where's that principle wrong? Or what about the Second Amendment? It allows you to defend yourself, and it allows for a well-regulated militia in addition. Now, some people are going to try to say, well, that's the National Guard. No. With a militia, what happens to the weapons when they're done? They've got together, they've done some marching or whatever training they do. Those guns and weapons go home to protect them from whoever. That might be the government. That might be some, just who knows. But it's open for possibility, as opposed to the National Guard is completely in control of a little bit of a combo of state and federal government. Mostly state, but a combo. What about the Fourth Amendment? What a brilliant idea. They can't just come search your property. They have to have probable cause. Fifth Amendment. You can't be incriminated against yourself, or you can't be compelled to testify against yourself. And also, the government has to give you a fair shot if they want to take your property by eminent domain. In other words, they have to pay you a fair price. Sixth Amendment, rights of the accused. Basically, it sets up a system where you get to know your accuser. You get to know the charges that are against you. You can have a jury trial. In other words, all of these rules they enshrined, and I purposely use the word enshrined, to protect you. I would really encourage everybody. Take a Constitution course. Better yet, what if you had a kid or a grandkid? What if you did the course with them and then you discussed it at the dinner table? If we don't do this, we have the possibility of losing these freedoms. Right now is a moment of hope, because I think that Trump is a moment of hope. He can't fix everything. We have to fix our country. We have to make our local officials accountable. You have to get involved. You can make a difference, but only if you get off your butt. I truly hope that's inspired you to action, because I'm passionate about the Constitution. For me, it's fun. It's interesting. And it's kind of amazing that all those years ago, those old white men, they happen to be white, somehow came together, and I believe were inspired by God, because they were at a standstill. And Ben Franklin said, let us pray. You know, the founding father that they say is the least religious. And that prayer resulted in the Constitution. Folks, I hope you have a great day. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXCX, the best talk in town.